somewhere between the first episode of it, Welcome to Derry, and its blood-soaked finale, HBO answered a question horror fans have been chasing since Stephen King published the novel in 1986. Does Pennywise have a daughter? The book hinted at it. The 2019 film buried it inside a 5-minute nightmare sequence most people forgot by the credits. And when Welcome to Derry premiered in October 2025, one carnival scene in a small Maine town cracked the whole thing back open. Here's what nobody tells you about that scene. The show wasn't hiding a mystery so the internet could solve it. It was setting a trap. Dozens of theory videos spent weeks guessing at a character's identity, and the writers already knew exactly how they were going to gut punch anyone paying close attention. By the time this video is over, you'll know the confirmed answer, why Chapter 2 has been lying to you for 6 years, and why the ending of Season 1 basically forces HBO's hand on Season 2. Let's start where the internet started. Episode 3 drops us in 1908. The earliest feeding cycle the show has confirmed. A traveling carnival rolls through Derry. Among the performers is a young girl in clown makeup, credited only as young Periwinkle, sharing the frame with a circus performer named Bob Gray. That name matters. In King's novel, Mrs. Kersh, the unsettling old woman who corners adult Beverly Marsh in Chapter 2, claims Bob Gray was her father, the man who later became Pennywise. The films leave that thread dangling. The show picks it up and pulls. Fans notice the connection almost immediately. Red balloons in the background of the 1908 footage. A wagon shaped like Pennywise's silhouette. A girl in an attic decades later flipping through a photo album that pairs a young clown performer with a man who looks unmistakably like Bill Skarsgård's version of Bob Gray. Add in a Juniper Hill Asylum employee who talks like someone who's already seen things she shouldn't have survived, and by episode 4, Stephen King forums had built a full theory. This asylum worker and the clown girl from 1908 are the same person. And she isn't just Pennywise's daughter. She's his accomplice. The math even lined up before the show confirmed anything. If the girl was around 8 in 1908, she'd be in her late 50s or 60s by 1962, which is exactly the age range the actress playing the mystery woman appeared to be. Small detail, but it's the kind of detail that separates a real theory from a guess, and it's worth giving credit where it's due. The internet did the homework correctly here. B. Why Episode 6, titled In the Name of the Father, the show stopped teasing and started confirming. Her name is Ingrid Kersh. Yes, that Kersh. Stephen King reportedly named the character after Irvin Kershner, the director of The Empire Strikes Back, decades before anyone thought this backstory would ever make it to screen. In a flashback to 1935, a young Ingrid, working the halls of Juniper Hill, leads a patient named Mabel down into the basement after the girl mentions hearing a clown calling her name. Mabel doesn't come back. Ingrid does. And in whatever emerged from that darkness, she sees her father. Not a monster wearing her father's memory. Her father returned to her. This is the detail that separates Welcome to Derry from a standard monster of the week structure, and it's worth sitting with. Ingrid isn't a woman who gets fooled once and spends the rest of the show trying to undo it. She's someone who lost her father as a child, found something in the dark that looked and sounded exactly like him, and chose, actively and repeatedly, to believe it. Every child Pennywise feeds on afterward is a transaction she enables, because as far as she's concerned, keeping the entity fed is the price of keeping her father close. Reports describe her home life outside of Pennywise's influence as isolated and controlled by an unkind husband, which tracks with something Stephen King's fiction returns to constantly. His monsters rarely have to manufacture loyalty from scratch. They just have to find someone already starving for belonging and offer a version of it that costs other people their lives. That's the daughter theory, fully confirmed. But the show wasn't finished with Ingrid, and this is where Welcome to Derry pulls off something most prequels don't even attempt. It reaches backward into a scene you already watched years ago and quietly rewrites what it meant to go back to Chapter 2. Adult Beverly visits an elderly Mrs. Kersh. Here's a story about a father who ran off to join the circus, and then watches the old woman peel apart into something that chases her through a hallway. Everyone assumed that was simply Pennywise wearing a disguise. Welcome to Derry confirms it, but with a detail that changes how the whole scene lands. The real Ingrid Kersh was born in 1900. By the time of that encounter in 2016, she would be 116 years old. The math doesn't work because the woman in that hallway was never Ingrid. It's Pennywise, wearing a face it knows will terrify Beverly specifically, because Beverly already met the real Ingrid once before, decades earlier, on the worst day of her childhood. And that's the finale's actual gut punch. The season's post-credits scene jumps forward to October 1988, 1 year before the events of the first film. An elderly Ingrid, now committed to Juniper Hill after a breakdown during the season's climax, hears screaming down the hall. She finds a room where teenage Beverly Marsh and her father are collapsed over the body of Beverly's mother, dead by suicide. Ingrid offers something meant to sound like comfort, a line about how nobody in this town really leaves, not even in death. It's supposed to be gentle. It plays like a threat because it's the same sentence, almost word for word, that Beverly hears again from Mrs. Kersh 28 years later, right before that encounter turns violent. That scene is doing two jobs at once. It explains exactly why adult Beverly's subconscious reached for Mrs. Kersh's face when Pennywise wanted to terrorize her in 2016, tying the entity's cruelty directly to one of the worst moments of her life. And it quietly closes a real story, too. The actress who originated Mrs. Kersh in Chapter 2, Joan Gregson, passed away in June 2025 at 91, months before Welcome to Derry even premiered. The producers reportedly brought her back for this scene after a camera operator mentioned working with her recently, and the creative team realized she was still active and willing. It became her final performance, and the season is dedicated to her memory. There's a second layer of franchise repair happening here that's easy to miss if you're only tracking Ingrid. Showrunner Jason Fuchs has talked about how the series was built to answer specific mysteries the films left open, and one of the cleanest examples has nothing to do with Pennywise directly. In the 2017 film, Mike Hamlin's grandfather Leroy tells him he's either inside the killing cage or outside of it, a line that always played as vague small-town cynicism. Welcome to Derry reveals Leroy isn't speaking in metaphor. He's talking about Derry itself, trapped inside a literal cage built by an ancient group called the Children of Maturin specifically to contain the entity. Suddenly a throwaway line from 8 years ago has teeth. That's the kind of connective tissue this show keeps threading through the original films. And it's a big part of why critics have been generous with a series that otherwise leans on some familiar horror beats. Where does the daughter theory leave the show, now that it's confirmed and not just fan speculation? It leaves Welcome to Derry with a character built to exist across every timeline the Muschietis have planned. Ingrid isn't a one-season twist. She's the connective tissue holding the whole prequel structure together, which brings us to Season 2. HBO hasn't issued an official renewal as of this video, but everyone attached to the project, HBO's own content chief included, has described the next chapter with enough specificity that it's clearly already in motion behind the scenes. Season 2 moves backward to 1935, the exact year we glimpsed young Ingrid working at Juniper Hill. Director Andy Muschietti has confirmed the central historical event will be the Bradley Gang Massacre, a fictionalized take on the real-life Brady Gang, a group of Depression-era bank robbers who met a violent end on the streets of Bangor, Maine. King wove a version of this into the novel's interlude chapters, and reports suggest the show is expanding it into a full-season arc. Expect a harsher, poorer Derry. No suburban comfort, no kids riding bikes past manicured lawns. Just a town already primed for an entity that barely has to work to spread fear. Here's where it gets interesting if you're tracking Ingrid specifically. Season 2 is set in 1935, and we've already seen a flashback confirming that the exact year she was working at Juniper Hill. That's not a coincidence the writers are likely to waste. Expect a younger version of the character to anchor a meaningful chunk of the new season, reportedly played by the same actress who handled the 1935 timeline scenes in Season 1. Which means the show gets to do something few horror series manage. Instead of introducing a new bond between a girl and a monster, it gets to walk us through the middle chapter of a relationship we already know the ending to. We know Ingrid survives 1935. We know she ends up institutionalized decades later, still convinced her father is coming back for her. Watching her walk toward that outcome, believing every step of the way that she's choosing love, might end up being the most quietly disturbing thing this franchise has done. And that's a high bar for a show that already features a dancing clown that eats children. Zoom out further, and the entire structure starts to look deliberate in a way that's rare for prequel television. The Muschietis have described a 3-season plan running backward through Pennywise's 27-year feeding cycles. 1962 in Season 1, 1935 in Season 2, 1908 in Season 3, closing the loop on the exact carnival scene that started this whole theory in the first place. If that structure holds, the show isn't just building toward telling us who Ingrid is. It's building toward showing us the day she lost her father for real, the day the entity decided which face to wear, and the day a scared, grieving little girl in clown makeup made a choice that would echo for over a century. That's a bold long-term bet for a network to make on a show it technically hasn't renewed yet. But between a record-setting premiere for HBO Max, a Saturn Award win for Best Horror Television Series, and a double-digit haul of Emmy nominations, betting against Welcome to Derry at this point feels like betting against the clown himself. History says that doesn't usually end well for the skeptic. So here's the actual question worth sitting with now that the daughter theory isn't a theory anymore. Is Ingrid Kersh a victim of the entity, or is she just as responsible as Pennywise for every child this town has lost? My take is that the show wants both answers to be true at the same time, and that tension is exactly what makes her more unsettling than Pennywise manages to be on his own for most of the runtime. He's a monster because that's his nature. She's dangerous because she chose it over and over for more than 100 years. Let me know your read in the comments. Victim, villain, or something the show hasn't fully shown us yet. And if you want the full breakdown the moment the Bradley gang storyline gets an official trailer, that video is already in the works. Subscribe so you don't miss it.